Could you spell your first and last name, please?
I am Michael W. Symanski. Symanski is spelled Symanski.
Perfect. And your title, please?
Well, I'm a retired Major General of the U.S. Army.
And my first question is, could you tell me about your childhood?
I grew up in Michigan on a farm just south of Detroit on the Ohio state border. My dad was in the auto parts manufacturing business, and he chose to buy and live on a farm. So I was raised on the farm, but spent a lot of time in the city of Detroit. That was in Hillsdale County, Michigan. We moved from there when I was 16 to Danville, Illinois, where I lived off and on until I moved here to Kansas City in 1993.
And could you tell me about your education?
Correct. I went to a small public school in Michigan, a rural school. When we moved to Illinois, I went to Schlarman High School, which is a Catholic school, starting in my sophomore year of high school. After high school, I went to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana and studied political science and history, and got a master's degree in history.
And what made you choose the University of Illinois?
It was very close.
Could you tell me about your life in the Army?
Life in the Army as a reservist was very satisfying. I started out after commissioning through ROTC at the University of Illinois in the active Army for 2 years in 1970, which was the tail end of the height of the Vietnam War, and also towards the end of the conscripted Army, the draft Army. After 2 years in the active Army, I came home to Danville. I was married, of course, by that time. Went into the Illinois Army National Guard, and after a few years, I went into the Army Reserve, where I stayed for the balance of my career.
Could you tell me about your family life?
Yes, it was quite normal, quite standard. Two parents and two older brothers, so that makes a total of 5. And as I mentioned before, we started out in Michigan and ended up in Danville, Illinois. It was very, very standard. As far as married life, I met my wife Elaine on the very first day of registration as a freshman at the University of Illinois, and we were married right after graduation. She got a bachelor's degree, and I got a master's degree at the end of 4 years. We got married, and then I went into the Army.
Could you tell me about your first experience in the Army?
Well, the first experience in ROTC was summer camp here at Fort Riley, which was the summer of 1968. And then after commissioning and graduation from the University of Illinois, I went to 2 years of active duty, first to Fort Benning, Georgia for infantry officers basic training and airborne training. And when that was concluded, I ended up at the 82nd Airborne Division in Fort Bragg, North Carolina in March of 1971. I stayed there until October of 1972. Started out in the infantry and the airborne infantry. Quickly became an acting company commander, which was quite an experience for a second lieutenant. And then from there went to the Air Defense Artillery Battalion within the 82nd Airborne Division, where I became a battery executive officer on a permanent basis. So it was exciting. Again, it was the end of the draftee Army. And the difference between the Army of 1970 with its draftees and the all-volunteer Army is completely different. They are completely different institutions. So I think in my career, it was challenging, satisfying, and I think exciting to be in an institution that changed that profoundly over my career. And I was able to experience the Army from the bottom up, all the way from platoon leader to being in the Army staff, on the Army staff in the Pentagon for 3 years of active duty at the end.
And could you tell me what your biggest honor is in your mind?
Well, the most exciting duty, let's put it that way, perhaps was when I was a battalion commander in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. That was a great challenge, even for a battalion commander, and I I think we pulled it off well, and I've always been very proud of the performance of the 387th Quartermaster Battalion out of Danville, Illinois.